Well, hey everyone, how you doing? It's Saturday evening, early evening, and it's a beautiful day. And I don't know how you're feeling about things. I want to be honest. I'm tickled, grateful for all of the hardworking people who work with voters registration and voting polls and selflessly and tirelessly have been spending their time and efforts counting, ensuring that our Constitution is upheld and that every vote gets counted. So I'm grateful for that, and that democracy persists. But what I want to talk about is about a parable that Jesus told. It's a bizarre parable that Jesus tells, and parables we've talked about, they go alongside, but they're not meant to be a literal or even a word for word allegory. They're meant to throw along out there to make us think deeper. And so here's the story. There's these 10, and most translations say virgins, but what it means is a young maiden. There's these 10 maidens that were waiting for a bridal party. And in the ancient Mediterranean, the way that couples would come together, they would most likely be an arranged marriage, and they would be engaged for a year, and then the bridegroom would come to get the bride and her party, and they would go to the groom's house, and the wedding festival would be for like a week or something at the groom's house. Really different than the way we do it in the 21st century. But this is the people that would have heard these first stories. This story would have understood that. So there's these young maidens, and they have their lamps to get ready to go travel when the bridegroom comes. And half of them are smart and have gotten some extra oil, and then the other half are foolish and they didn't get any extra. And then they all fall asleep while they're waiting. And then when the bridegroom comes, he calls out, and they all jump up, and they're supposed to go with him. Well, the ones that had been foolish and didn't have any extra started asking the ones that had brought extra if they would share. And they said no, because we don't want to run out. And so they went on their way, and the foolish ones had to go an extra place to get more oil. And then by the time they got to the wedding party, the bridegroom said, "Oh, I don't know who you are." So it's a bizarre story, and a lot of times it gets used to remind us that we need to be, diligent in our Bible reading and diligent in our faith, so that we just never know when Christ might be coming back. But I would like to suggest that there's other things to get out of this, and I want to bring out a little nugget for you today. I did some research on the word oil because I thought that was interesting. It's used, I think like 170 times or maybe more than that in Scripture, and it always represents in some way. It's known to be about wealth or richness, which we can relate to that because in the oil industry, or if people hit it rich in the oil industry, you assume that they're wealthy. And so oil was very precious back then. And the word that gets translated into oil, the verb of that would be to be fat. And so also meat that was rich in fat, that was all desirable, and it was all really meant for the privileged. Now the verb and the word that gets translated into oil, the root word of that is the same. It's the root word that gets translated into name. But the Hebraic understanding, the ancient Hebraic understanding of that word would have meant character. And if you go back and you look at the different stories, both in Scripture and through other historians, the naming of things is very important. Now, today, sometimes we name our kids after celebrities. We don't always put as much thought, the same kind of thought into it. But back then, when they named someone, it was meant to reflect their character. And especially in these stories, the stories that they give the characters, they reflect their character somehow. And so I want to talk about that for a minute, because when I think of that, when I think of character, that is the source of our own individual wealth And that is also the source of our collective or societal wealth. You know, we have this notion that money and power and all of these external things are what determined whether we're wealthy or not. But if we are really people that dig deeper into things, and when you think about your own life, all of that stuff is great, but that doesn't determine the richness of your life. And I would suggest to you that one of the things that this parable is getting at is that if you have this sense of character that you are operating out of, that you're living your life out of this center, which I believe is the divine spark, the image in which we were all created, then that's what makes our life rich and fulfilling, because it affects our decisions, it affects our relationships, it affects everything about how we move and are and act in life. And we all have that same spark, and we all have that capability. By the power of this love of spirit, we have the power to live out of that. And we all are fools sometimes. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't count the times that I have been foolish and made decisions that weren't based out of that center. And maybe it was out of fatigue or insecurity or stress or whatever, but there are times when we make decisions and represent ourselves in the world that don't really show that character that the Creator God gave us. And I think that's just a real important thing to think about when we consider this parable, and also when we consider where we are in our time and our place, both as individuals and as a collective society. Because probably never, or not in our lifetime, have things been so clearly polarized. And yet, we're all called, we have this opportunity to move forward in a path of healing if we'll remember that sense of integrity that we're called to live out of. And the sense of character that goes beyond just our own selfish desires, that we realize it's not always about us, but that it's about the greater good. And that we have this opportunity and possibility of moving forward in a healthier, more kingdom-like way of building a kingdom together. And I just think it's interesting to think about that now. Now, when the foolish maidens got to the wedding festival and the bridegroom said, "I don't know you," what I realize is that when God sees us, God sees that divine spark. And however you imagine God, I don't imagine God as a man or a person or anything. I imagine God as more this verb of loving, and this reality that knows us as we truly are, and refuses to think of us when we're not being our true self, that refuses us to see us that way. So if you can kind of grasp that and see that we all have that divine spark, you think about the person that maybe irritates you the most, or the person that you think maybe they're an evil person. I don't really think that anyone is created to be evil. I mean, no one's created to be evil, but I don't think there's really evil people, but there are people that are not operating out of that divine spark. And so they make evil decisions, and they do evil and selfish and narcissistic things. But if they can remember who they are and whose they are, then anyone can move back into that place of character, so that no one is a lost cause, even when it feels like it at times. Now, that does not mean that a person should stay with someone who's abusing them, or that we don't need to make better choices collectively. I believe that we've made a good choice to move in a different direction as a nation. But that doesn't mean that we don't still look for the divine spark in one another. And I don't know, I find comfort in that and encouragement, and I find hope hope that that we all, just the recognition that we all run out of our sense of identity sometimes, but if we can remember who we are, that we can get back up and we can make better choices and do better. And remember, Jesus was always talking beyond just the individual, but as a collective. So I hope that was encouraging to you, and I hope that in the days to come, all of our hope can be restored and we can move forward in a healing path. God bless you, and go in peace.